Here's some of the headlines. Armed man targets D.C. restaurant that faced violent threats because of fake news pushed by the right. And police fake news story led gunman to popular D.C. pizzeria.
One of the big surprises of the presidential campaign was the explosion of fake news on the internet. Fantastic tales that some believe to be true.
Fake news, real gunfire. A North Carolina man arrested in a D.C. pizza shop after brandishing a gun, telling police he was there to investigate a conspiracy theory called Pizzagate.
28-year-old Edgar Welch was arrested in Washington Sunday afternoon outside Comet Ping Pong, a popular family pizza parlor. D.C. police say Welch fired at least one round into the restaurant floor with an AR-15 rifle like this one on his Facebook page. No one was injured. Police say Welch drove all the way from North Carolina to self-investigate Pizzagate, a fictitious online conspiracy theory. Pizzagate started on the internet shortly before Election Day when right-wing sites that make up fake news spread rumors that Hillary Clinton was involved in a child sex trafficking ring in D.C. Court documents say Welch read online that the Comet restaurant was harboring child sex slaves and he was armed to help rescue them. He surrendered peacefully when he found no evidence that underage children were being harbored in the restaurant. Pizzagate has been pushed by Michael G. Flynn, son of retired Lieutenant General Michael T. Flynn, chosen by President-elect Trump to be his national security advisor. The two were seen together at Trump Tower last month. After Welch's arrest Sunday, the younger Flynn tweeted, "Until Pizzagate proven to be false, it'll remain a story." General Flynn himself has also spread stories claiming to link Mrs. Clinton to criminal activity. 6 days before the election, Flynn tweeted, "You decide. NYPD blows whistle on new Hillary emails, money laundering, sex crimes with children, etc. Must read."
Your idea to protest, please stay all day.
This is not the first time Pizzagate believers have confronted Comet Ping Pong owner James Alefantis. He says he's been getting threats for weeks.
These stories are completely and entirely false. What happened today demonstrates that promoting false and reckless conspiracy theories do come with consequences.
This was a terrifying experience for my children.
Sharif Simley was at Comet Ping Pong with his wife and 3 children when Welch walked in.
This is nothing but, terrorism, and it should be condemned as such.
President-elect Donald Trump has blasted Beijing's economic and military stances with a pair of tweets on Sunday. He said, "Did China ask us if it was okay to devalue their currency, heavily tax our products going into their country, or to build a massive military complex in the middle of the South China Sea? I don't think so." A spokesman for the Chinese Foreign Ministry said it had no comment on what motivated the Trump team to make such tweets. Mr. Trump took to Twitter following his telephone conversation with Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen on Friday, a move that broke with decades of diplomatic protocol with China.
I think the conversation that happened this week with the president of Taiwan was a courtesy call. She reached out to the president-elect, and he took the call from the democratically elected leader of Taiwan. And
senior members of Mr. Trump's transition team had sought to play down concerns that this heralded a break from long-standing U.S. policy on China. China's foreign ministry said it had launched representations with the relevant parties in the US. Beijing's One China policy insists that the US and other countries accept an elaborate pretense that Taiwan is part of One China and not an independent country. US president-elects have traditionally played along with this, declining calls from Taiwanese leaders. Mr. Liu said China would definitely make clear our own position and attitude towards the parts of their policies that concern China. He added that the Taiwan issue has always been the most important and sensitive one in China-US relations, and that the One China policy is an important political precondition of healthy and stable China-US relations.
Speaking of breaking news, we do have a Fox News alert. We're learning China has flown a pair of long-range nuclear-capable bombers around Taiwan for the very first time. And it happened less than a week before President-elect Trump took that congratulatory phone call, as has been described, from Taiwan's leader. Lucas Tomlinson is live at the Pentagon. He's part of the team breaking this story. Lucas, what do we know about this so far?
Well, Jenna, we know that the flight took place less than a week before President-elect Donald Trump spoke to the Taiwanese president. A pair of Chinese nuclear-capable H-6 bombers flew from a base in mainland China, escorted by 2 other planes. They were doing surveillance conducted a flight around the island of Taiwan, as you said, for the first time, and we drew a response from the Japanese Air Force, who scrambled 8 F-15 fighter jets to take a look at this unprecedented Chinese flight. And some would say aggression, although one U.S. expert that we spoke to was not surprised at all.
China has steadily built up a massive military capability in the area around Taiwan. This isn't simply a matter of flying bombers. Understand that technically we can't object to flying bombers near Taiwan if we are flying combat aircraft and reconnaissance aircraft near China.
In one of President Donald Trump's first actions in office, the private files outlining hidden agreements in the Iran nuclear deal may be released. Sources say senior officials who will be part of the Trump administration are already discussing what so far unseen information about the Iran agreement they will be able to make public after January. The release of these documents echo President Obama's early decision to release the legal justification approving the CIA's interrogation program during President George W. Bush's tenure, in the sense that the incoming administration wants to release potentially embarrassing documents in hopes of turning the page on the last administration's actions. There are many unclassified documents in the case of the Iran nuclear deal that have been held by the Obama administration in tightly controlled security environments that effectively make it impossible for the public to see them.
Iran's nuclear chief has warned that the country will give a strong response to any violation of the nuclear deal with the P5+1 group of countries. Ali Akbar Saleh issued the warning in an address to the International Conference on Nuclear Security in Vienna. Saleh dismissed as unwise the recent moves against the nuclear deal known as the JCPOA in the U.S. The top nuclear official later said in an interview with Press TV that Iran has stayed committed to the agreement.
China and Iran have urged all countries involved in the nuclear agreement with Iran to comply with the deal. The response from Iran and China came as the Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif visited his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi in Beijing on Monday.
Iran and China worked closely during the negotiation and signing of Iran's nuclear agreement, and China played a critical role during the process. The Joint Comprehensive Plan for Action is a multilateral agreement, and all countries involved have an obligation to fully implement it. Iran will not allow any country to take unilateral actions that violate the agreement.
Well, Russia and China have blocked a United Nations Security Council vote for a ceasefire in the Syrian city of Aleppo. The two countries say the Security Council draft resolution was not in line with the agreement between Russia and the United States.
Now, Russian Ambassador Vitaly Churkin has made clear that the reason that this idea of a ceasefire is not a good idea is because these are not real ceasefires. The rebels, the anti-government fighters, the terrorists don't recognize these ceasefires and continue to attack. And in the past, these ceasefires have been used as a way to regroup by the terrorist forces. Russian Ambassador Vitaly Churkin has made clear that that there needs to be a discussion, further discussion in Geneva about what Russia has repeatedly called for, which is the separation of the al-Nusra terrorists from the so-called moderate rebels. These forces need to be separated. Now, the UN Special Envoy for Syria, de Mistura, has also made the same call and repeatedly called for the al-Nusra terrorists to separate themselves from the moderate rebels. But at the moment, that separation has not taken place.
We begin this hour with breaking news from Aleppo, where extremists have shelled a Russian military hospital, killing a female paramedic and injuring 2 service personnel.
Давай, быстрее уходим! Разница между первой и второй 3 минуты максимум.
Without any doubt, the shelling was carried out by militants from the opposition. We understand where they got the exact coordinates of a specific Russian hospital from the moment it started working. This means the responsibility for the deaths and injuries of our paramedics who were helping the children of Aleppo lies not only with the militants. The blood of our service personnel is also on the hands of those who created, fostered and armed these animals.
Identifying the moderates has been the biggest problem the United States has had so far.
How is a new administration going to come in and sort out who they're supporting, who they're not supporting when they're hard to identify? Or maybe the Trump administration would be able to identify people a lot better than the Obama administration on this. Your thoughts on it tonight?
Well, my thoughts on it are that the Trump administration has already, and Mr. Trump himself has already said you can't distinguish them. We don't know who they are, who these so-called moderates are. This has been the problem now with the U.S. and Russian so-called agreement that they're supposed to be working out. They're not going to be able to do it. The United States isn't going to be able to intervene. And I might add that the so-called moderate groups have already announced, their leadership has already announced, they're not going to stop. They're going to continue fighting, and they're going to join Nusra.
So these alliances, allegiance to one another, very fragile. If the United States were to throw more arms into it, they don't know who's getting them, number one. So basically, it looks like the jihadist group is going to grow and continue to grow, which of course is going to get a reaction out of the Russians and of course the Syrian army to maybe even a higher level of activity. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there will be higher levels of activity, and I think that the United States is arming to some extent through Saudi Arabia and Qatar. The rebels on the ground probably have been given assurances they not only will continually be financed, but also be armed, and they're hoping for heavier weapons. And I think that their goal is not to defeat ISIS. Their goal is to overthrow the government of Bashar al-Assad.
Moving on to some other news, South Korea's foreign minister has warned that North Korea could illegally transfer nuclear know-how and material to terrorist groups. Making his opening remarks at the International Atomic Energy Agency's conference on nuclear security in Vienna on Monday, Yoon Byung-se said terrorist organizations would be willing to pay huge sums of money to acquire nuclear material, and North Korea could supply it, as the regime is currently pressed for cash.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has slammed Israel's settlement policy, saying they dash hopes of a, quote, peace deal between Israel and the Palestinians. Kerry says more than 50% of the current Israeli cabinet is publicly opposed to a Palestinian state. Washington's top diplomat was speaking at the annual gathering of senior Israeli and U.S. policymakers called Saban Forum. The Secretary of State delivered the remarks shortly after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the same forum in a video call.
Palestinian President and leader of Fatah Party Mahmoud Abbas says the new strategy shows the party's capabilities towards ending the Israeli occupation by 2017.
من المؤكد أن ما سجله المؤتمر من نجاح وما عكسته برامجه من دلالة على قدرة حركتنا على تحديد المهمات واعتماد طرائق العمل المناسبة سيقوي عزيمة شعبنا في نضاله.
The president says the party will work to isolate and pressure Israel internationally.
India's prime minister is forcing the people to go mostly cashless, even if they hate him for it. 86% of its cash has been pulled out of circulation, but the country's cash flow crisis is a boon for the mobile payment business. In a country notorious for running on hard cash, millions are for the first time opting to digitize their wallets. It's already proving profitable for Alibaba-backed Paytm, one of the main players in India's fintech scene. It says it's nearly doubled the number of small merchants on its roster. Both Paytm and rival MobiKwik have reportedly hired thousands of new sales agents to keep pace with the rapid surge in demand. They're not alone. Companies like Ola Money and FreeCharge have seen a flood of interest. Even Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself can't resist. The government has its own mobile payment system that ties bank accounts to cell phones. An increasingly cashless India will also likely move up the rollout dates for outside players. Some of the biggest names in mobile pay, like Apple and Samsung, have yet to launch in the Indian market. In a country where typically more than 90% of transactions happen in cash, moving away from hard currency could open up a massive mobile payment market.
What could be better than self-checkout lines at the supermarket? No checkout lines. Amazon's new brick-and-mortar store is making that a reality. It's testing a new smart grocery store in Seattle called Amazon Go. It allows shoppers to literally walk in, grab food off the shelves, and walk out without standing in a cash register line. Customers tap their smartphones as they walk into the store, which then connects them to their Amazon Prime accounts. By using machine learning, sensors, and artificial intelligence, the company says it can track the items customers pick up. Amazon's calling it Just Walk Out technology and is set to open to the public in early 2017.
Identification in a digital world is crucial, from voting to healthcare to online biometrics. Ensure the security of those transactions and ensure a fast, frictionless customer experience as well.
How did biometrics come about?
It really wasn't called biometrics, it was called fingerprinting, understanding that your fingerprints were a unique identifier to ensure that you were you. There's iris image, face, voice. Some people are working on gait biometrics in terms of how you walk.
Thank you. You have been identified.
Innovations about bringing people what they didn't know they want. Aviation and travel, where there's all these bottlenecks and lines. Sports stadiums where you're seeing the same thing. Healthcare, where somebody wants to know that you are you and all the things associated with your healthcare. When you're taking out a credit card and payment. Longer term, voting. It's all places where somebody wants to ensure your identity. In the next 5 to 10 years, we will look back on pictures of all of us carrying around driver's license and credit cards and keys and question why we did that, sort of like my kids now question the rotary phone.
Scientists have identified a threatening new type of antibiotic resistance among U.S. farm animals. The carbapenem class of antibiotics are considered the last line of defense against hard-to-treat bacterial infections. These antibiotics have been banned for veterinary use in the United States to minimize the risk that animals will develop a resistance and spread to humans. Though there have been cases identified already in Europe and Asia, this is the first indication of the problem on U.S. farms.
Bolivia's once second largest lake is now completely dry after the worst drought in a quarter of a century. Describing themselves as climate refugees, locals living next to Lake Pupu in the south of the country say everything has perished, including their livelihoods. The prolonged drought is thought to have been exacerbated by the El Niño weather phenomenon and rising global temperatures.
On Monday, President-elect Donald Trump held a meeting with former Vice President Al Gore, who has devoted years to fighting climate change, a topic Trump himself has denounced in the recent past. Following the conversation, Gore told reporters, "I had a lengthy and very productive session with the president-elect. It was a sincere search for areas of common ground. I found it to be an extremely interesting conversation, to be continued." Gore also reportedly met with Trump's daughter Ivanka, but revealed he spent a majority of the time with the president-elect.
A new show of unity, just hours after celebrating that the Dakota Access Pipeline was denied a permit to build under the Missouri River and along the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation, the harsh reality set in.
We have a new administration coming in, and I think anything done now could be undone in a month.
Thousands marched in blizzard conditions today as the company building the pipeline responded defiantly, saying it is fully committed to ensuring this vital project is brought to completion without any additional rerouting. President-elect Trump's team today reiterated their support for the project. At one point, Trump himself owned shares in the company building the pipeline. His spokesperson tells NBC News he has sold those shares. Despite the politics at play, people are still arriving to support the cause.
We're not going anywhere. No one's going anywhere.
Is everything okay? Is there anything I can get for you?
At this Cheddar's restaurant,
you're welcome.
A slow New Year's Eve brought Heather Shellstetter a fortune. There on someone's bill, a 370% tip. But notice those words on the left. The story behind them left this waitress in tears.
That she made a difference. She made me realize that people are still out there that do care. And thank you, because I didn't get to thank her.
That stranger sat right here with two kids. As they scanned menus, Shellstetter began chatting, learning her customer was a criminal psychologist struggling with grief and challenging days ahead.
She was gonna interview people that, come back from the war and with, PTSD. And so they come back and she said that it's really hard for her to do that because her brother was killed over in a war. We got to talking about my grandmother.
85-year-old Elaine Hacker was Shellstetter's grandma. She died just before Thanksgiving. And every day since is a struggle for this waitress who explained to her customer how she's never lost a loved one this close before.
We both started getting teary-eyed, and then, so then we're both like trying to blink it away, and it kind of went from there, and we just continued to talk for a few minutes till the next table came in, and she got up and left.
That's when Shellstetter discovered this $100 tip for a $27 meal and inspiration.
Well, it made me feel so special, important, like she understood, because she also left a note things will get better, because she knew the heart of losing someone.
And that heart helped at least one waitress have an amazing new year.